When it comes to dividing up our assets, how do we make that feel equal between our farming and our off-farming children? I don't like the word equal. I never talk about it in my family discussions, but we do talk about what is fair. In order for something to be fair, we first must decide what are we measuring. Recognizing that in ag, we have huge capital requirements, and are we measuring fair market value or productive value of our assets? Also, when we think about writing a will, this is one of the most emotional, encompassing things that anyone can do. I know that when my parents sat me down and we reviewed their will, and then I also started to write my own will, I cried during most of the conversation because it was just imagining them both not being here. And the big kicker, who's gonna get my precious cows and horses if we're all gone? When it comes time to start thinking about, from the senior generation's perspective, how are we going to try to break up this pie? The big question you must ask yourself is, are we leaving land to an off-farm child? If we are, that's fine. We just need that declaration so that we can then move on with our transition plan. If as a family or as parents, we have decided to leave land to an off-farm child, then leases are a big thing to think about. So they're not new, they're not sexy, they've been around for a long time. They've been so vague for so long that they've caused, in some cases, more harm than good. So for example, if you open up a will and says, Susie will lease back to her farming brother Bob, hard stop. How long? At what rate? You now have your family members sitting together at an intense time of grief, and now they're supposed to figure out these issues between them. That's just asking for hard feelings, potentially between family members. So how do we set up then a proper lease? So remember, this is in a will. So number one, specific number of years. Again, how do we choose that? Some families will pick a minimum of 3 years for one crop rotation. Another way to look at it is, how long as parents did you want to own that land? So for example, if you're 60 today and said, I wanted to own it until 70, then perhaps the lease is for 10 years. Some farm families really want to emphasize why they chose the date range they did, for example, 10 years. They'll actually accompany the will with a handwritten note from mom and dad, just really taking the time to explain, hey, off-farm child, we recognize we're asking you to hold on to this land for a set amount of period, and here's our reason why. That doesn't hold up anything in court, but it's just a reminder when you're sitting around the table in intense grief, why the decisions made were made. How do we set the rate? A unique way to do this is trying to use math to help alleviate emotion. Because again, the off-farm child isn't greedy or evil if they want a good return on their asset. However, the farming child's business, his books may balance by hardly paying mom and dad rent at all. So where do we set this rate? I really like using the crop insurance index because it's a proxy. Again, this takes some tweaking and looking at proactively as a family. But what I'm trying to do here is have a third-party resource that the farming child can scan to their off-farm sibling and say, hey, here's the rate for the year, 25% of crop insurance, for example. What we're really trying to achieve, our objective, is a time frame for the farming child to plan to replace that land, whether it be buying off their off-farm sibling or purchasing new land in the future. It's important to remember that anything can be contested in a will. However, what this is really trying to create is a family memorandum of understanding. So having the children sit down around the table, mom and dad's will has now been open, and say, okay, the objective was for, yes, the off-farm child to receive land wealth. However, we want to protect the farm business, hence why the lease was created to create that time period. With land values the way they are today, it is very common for land to be left to an off-farm child, I'm finding with my families. Ensure that your will lease statement is not vague. So how long is the lease to be for? What is going to be the rate? And ensuring we're protecting the farming child with the caveat against a sale of land. Option 1.5, when still relating to the leases, is what if the off-farm child wants to sell land before the lease period is up? We give the option to the farming child to buy this property at 75% of appraised value. The 25% is their down payment, that break. So what's important here is an in-family discount an in-family discount, meaning I love working with families because that's where I learned all of my new ideas and suggestions. I had an off-farm daughter say to me, what if my brother sells land during X amount of time? Do I get the chance to buy it off of him at 75% of appraised value, even though this off-farm child had no intention of being a farmer? She just knew that that was a great investment opportunity. So I think that's a really cool conversation to have as a family is an in-family discount for all of the children, whether you're farming or not. Remembering that discount can't go on forever, so that discount of 75% of appraised value is only during the lease period. A lot of the times we'll have both siblings, farming and off-farm sibling, have their own appraiser, and we'll take the average of the two to get that amount, recognizing that they should be within, say, a 10% difference. If there's a great difference between the two appraisers, some investigation is required. Keep in mind when it comes to transparency in wills, different advisors have different opinions on this. Like with everything we discussed today, very important to utilize your technical advisors. So talk to your accountants, talk to your lawyers, find what options fit best for you and your family. Each situation must be analyzed on its own merit. If you're looking for any additional resources on this topic, check out our previous video titled Fair versus Equal with Patty and I, and as well, FCC's website, fcc.ca, has a lot of resources and tools when it comes to transferring land.